We started ZZ Top in 1969. We carried on without stop, after literally 7 years of nonstop touring. Our first official release for Warner Brothers.
In a rock world brimming with wild personalities, scandals, and early deaths, Billy Gibbons moves like a lone figure on horseback across the American West, quiet, unhurried, but impossible to dismiss. With a beard so iconic it became its own symbol, sunglasses that never come off, and his Pearly Gates guitar roaring like a V8 engine across the Texas desert, he's not just the heart of ZZ Top. He's one of the last remaining faces of raw, unfiltered rock and roll. Born in 1949, Billy Gibbons entered music not through controversy or rebellion, but through a grounded passion rooted in blues, fused with the sophistication of jazz and the fire of Southern rock. He didn't break rules through appearance. He did it by refusing to change when the world around him sprinted toward whatever was trendy. For over 50 years, he never tried to be fresh, yet people couldn't help but look back, because his unwavering identity demanded it. Among the Mick Jaggers, Ozzy Osbournes, and Lemmy Kilmisters, men who ignited headlines with explosive lives, Billy Gibbons walked a different path. Quiet, consistent, and so distinct he became a category of his own. He didn't have to shout to be heard. His guitar roared for him. He didn't need rebellion to be remembered. Just stepping on stage was enough to silence the room. This isn't just the story of a guitarist. It's the journey of a man who never abandoned his essence, never surrendered to the fading pulse of time, and never traded his music for anything else. Billy Gibbons, the last man standing in a rock world that's slowly vanishing. And the question remains, how has he endured, loud, steady, and unchanged? Early life. Billy Gibbons was born on December 16, 1949, in Houston, Texas. Not into a rough working-class neighborhood or a household of hardship like many rock legends, but into a home filled with art and classical music. His father, Frederick Royal Gibbons, was a conductor and music producer for MGM Studios, who worked with icons like Judy Garland and Nat King Cole. In that house, Billy didn't grow up surrounded by shouting or violence, but by violins, jazz, and lush Hollywood film scores playing through the evenings. And yet, that environment made young Billy realize how different he was. Amid the perfectly arranged compositions, he began searching for something rawer, wilder, as if a different rhythm pulsed in his veins. At the age of 7, his father took him to New York to study Latin percussion with jazz legend Tito Puente. While other kids followed traditional piano lessons, Billy was immersed in congas, timbales, and the fiery pulse of Cuban rhythm. It was the first time he touched music not through theory, but through instinct. But the real door didn't open until he turned 13, when he received his first Gibson Melody Maker and a small Fender amp. He didn't follow sheet music. He experimented, blended, and played in a language only he understood. The guitar became an extension of his body, not to perform, but to express what words couldn't say. Raised among classical musicians, Billy was instead drawn to the rebels, Elvis Presley's primal croon, Little Richard's wild screams, and most of all, B.B. King, who could make a single blues note pierce an entire room. Billy studied them, not to imitate, but to understand the emotion beneath the sound. From this strange fusion, between refined classical foundations and the sensual urgency of blues, Billy Gibbons began to shape an unmistakable, unreplicable musical identity. In high school, he moved to California to attend Warner Brothers Art School, where he studied painting, design, and contemporary art, elements that would later leave a clear imprint on ZZ Top's visual and aesthetic style. But no matter where he went, one fire burned steadily within him: the urge to bring blues to the world in his own way. He didn't grow up through adversity, but through creative freedom and an internal tension between reason and instinct. And it was this early reverse current that planted the seed for a rock artist unlike any other. Not bound by genre, yet present wherever the world needed something real to be played. Early career. In the late 1960s, as the counterculture movement exploded alongside psychedelic music, a young Billy Gibbons, barely out of his teens, wasn't standing on the sidelines. From late-night jam sessions in his garage, he formed his first band, the Moving Sidewalks. It wasn't raw blues nor classic rock and roll. The group dove headfirst into psychedelia, a genre awash in swirling soundscapes, dreamy distortion, and lyrical disorientation that perfectly mirrored the rising tide of Woodstock-era rebellion. They quickly gained local attention, releasing the album Flash, 1968, and especially the single 99th Floor, a fuzz-soaked, organ-heavy trip that captured the full LSD-laced chaos of the time. That early step brought Billy face-to-face with the most influential figure of his life, Jimi Hendrix. When the Moving Sidewalks opened for the Jimi Hendrix Experience during their 1968 tour, Billy wasn't just another young guitarist sharing the bill, he became someone Hendrix truly noticed. According to friends and press at the time, Hendrix once called Gibbons the best young guitarist in America. Not for speed, but for feel, for groove, for the wild creativity Gibbons unleashed with just a few perfectly placed notes. In a world of players trying to become superheroes, Billy chose instead to be a storyteller, speaking through strings, not shouting through flash. Despite Hendrix's praise, Gibbons didn't ride the psychedelic wave to its burnout. After a few years with the Moving Sidewalks, he realized he didn't belong in that dreamy space. Back in Houston, he went searching for a sound that was earthier, grittier, music that smelled like sweat, dust, and whiskey. That search led him to Dusty Hill, a bassist with a gravel-toned voice and Texas swagger, and drummer Frank Beard. No grand introductions were needed. They met, played a few chords, nodded in agreement, and in 1969, ZZ Top was born. No fanfare, no million-dollar deal, just an unspoken pact among blues-driven souls. Rather than chase the commercial sounds of the moment, ZZ Top carved out a different road, blending Southern blues with rock's bite and Texas's laid-back swagger. They didn't seek the spotlight. They sought the groove that made heads nod and feet stomp. In an era where bands changed styles like outfits, ZZ Top started slow but steady, and Billy Gibbons was at the helm. He was no longer just a promising young guitarist. He had become the sonic architect of a new era, an era where fuzz, slide, Texas shuffle, and refined minimalism became deadly tools. And most importantly, he still played not for approval, but for himself. Career breakthrough. While most bands needed scandals, luck, or massive backing to survive, ZZ Top did the opposite. They started quietly, lived simply, and slowly embedded themselves into the heart of America with the kind of music they believed in. And leading that journey was none other than Billy Gibbons, the wiry guitarist with the heavy beard, quiet gaze, and a guitar tone fierce enough to stop desert winds in their tracks. The turning point came with Tres Hombres, 1973, the album that elevated ZZ Top from a local blues rock outfit to a national phenomenon. The track La Grange, with its thick Texas shuffle and backroad swagger, was more than just a hit. It became an unofficial anthem for Southern rebels everywhere. Gibbons' raspy voice, his guitar biting through every note, and Frank Beard's defiant drum groove painted a world where rock didn't need polish, just grit and truth. The 1970s saw ZZ Top become a touring force. No choreography, no dancers, no pyrotechnics. Just three men standing in a sea of fans, playing as if music was the only language they'd ever learned. And in that stark simplicity, their magic came alive. What the audience got wasn't a performance. It was an immersion into pure Texas. The smell of cigarettes, the sound of worn leather, and a kind of rebellious pride that didn't ask for approval. When the 1980s rolled in and MTV began reshaping pop culture, many veteran bands scrambled to modernize. But ZZ Top broke through by staying exactly as they were. Music videos like Sharp Dressed Man, Legs, and Gimme All Your Lovin' didn't just dominate airwaves. They turned ZZ Top into cultural memes before memes existed. While other bands shaved their beards, Gibbons and Hill grew theirs longer. While others donned slick leather, they wore buffalo hide coats and cowboy boots. Their unwavering commitment to their identity made them paradoxically the most stylish of all. ZZ Top kept releasing albums and touring relentlessly through every decade. Eliminator, 1983, sold over 10 million copies. Afterburner, 1985, kept their MTV audience hooked. Recycler, 1990, added a touch of tech but stayed rooted in blues. And at the center of it all, Billy Gibbons was both sonic and visual architect. He wasn't a rock star in the typical sense. He was the aesthetic engine of a three-man empire. In 2004, ZZ Top was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a long overdue but well-deserved honor. Gibbons didn't make a fuss. For him, the real reward was playing the music he believed in, alongside bandmates who had stood by him for over 30 years. No noise, no gimmick, no reinvention to please the market. ZZ Top succeeded because they never tried to please anyone but themselves. And Billy Gibbons, like a desert preacher, continues to strum hymns from a land where even the blazing sun can't burn away the soul of rock. Crisis and Rebirth. On July 28, 2021, in a small Houston hotel, Dusty Hill, Billy Gibbons' companion of more than half a century, passed away quietly in his sleep. No fanfare, no media swarm, no formal farewell. Just silence, fitting for the way Dusty lived and devastating in its stillness for the heart of ZZ Top. To outsiders, ZZ Top might have been just a three-man band, but to Gibbons, it was family, a shared heartbeat that couldn't be replaced. From 1969 until Dusty's final day, the trio never changed, a near impossibility in the rock world. Their bond wasn't built on contracts or fame, but on unshakable trust. Across thousands of shows, they never needed to look at each other to know what came next. A slight tilt of the head, a single guitar note, and the internal rhythm of three souls moved as one. When Dusty died, Billy Gibbons didn't go on TV in tears or give sorrowful interviews. He simply wrote one quiet line. Dusty said, "The show must go on, so it shall." And just 3 days later, ZZ Top resumed their tour, Elwood Francis, their longtime guitar tech, stepping in on bass per Dusty's final wish. To some, it seemed cold, but for Gibbons, it was sacred duty. He knew Dusty better than anyone. His friend never wanted to be the reason the music stopped. Continuing wasn't forgetting. It was the purest form of tribute. Still, the absence was undeniable. On stage, Gibbons still played those familiar riffs, still wore his sunglasses, and smiled that half smile, but every note carried a strange quiet, as if a part of his soul had gone with Dusty. The synced head nods were gone. The raspy harmony from stage left no longer answered. Only that bearded man remained, alone but unbroken. And then, in what could have been his darkest hour, Gibbons did the unexpected. He released his third solo album, Hardware, 2021. Unlike his previous blues-focused projects, Hardware was raw, desert-drenched, tough as sun-scorched pavement. It wasn't just music, it was medicine. Through every riff, every lyric, he kept Dusty alive in pulse and tone. Tracks like More, 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 She's on Fire, and SGLMBBR didn't mourn, they surged. Each one felt like a chapter in a eulogy not written with sorrow, but with the fire of life. That's how Billy Gibbons rose again. Not with tears, but with his guitar. In a world where bands often fall apart after losing a member, Billy Gibbons chose a different path. He didn't stop, not because he didn't feel pain, but because the pain demanded more music. For him, Rock isn't a performance, it's breathing. And as long as he's alive, he won't stop playing. Because living means never dropping the beat. Personal life. While many rock stars fuel their fame with personal drama, scandals, or carefully curated branding, Billy Gibbons chose the opposite, stepping back from the spotlight. Not because he feared attention, but because he had nothing to flaunt, and no need to. For decades, Gibbons kept his private life under lock and key. He rarely appeared with any woman in public, never stirred up romantic gossip, and even his most devoted fans couldn't tell you exactly where he lives. He's like a cowboy who wandered into the era of social media but kept riding solo, leaving no footprints. It wasn't until 2005, after more than 15 years of quiet courtship, that he finally married Gilligan Stillwater, his longtime partner. They have no children, and to this day, there are no public wedding photos, no couple interviews, no tell-all features in the press. Billy Gibbons' life revolves around three things: guitars, cars, and art. He owns a multi-million-dollar collection of vintage vehicles, hot rods, low-riders, muscle cars, each customized to his own eccentric vision. Many of these cars have starred in ZZ Top's iconic music videos. But unlike other collectors who show off in pristine garages, Gibbons actually drives his cars to grab coffee, to gigs, across deserts, as if they're not trophies, but road-worn companions. His home, believed to be somewhere between Texas and California, is described as a bizarre sanctuary. Walls adorned with pop art, Mexican skull sculptures, vintage amplifiers, and hundreds of guitars spanning from the 1950s to the present. He calls himself a disciple of anything that makes a weird sound, and once had a guitar built from alligator bones and drums covered in snakeskin. Despite his reclusive lifestyle, Gibbons isn't disconnected. He's a recurring guest on music talk shows, played himself in the TV series Bones, and is widely known as Hollywood's weirdest cool guy that no one can hate. Icons like Slash, Dave Grohl, Kid Rock, and Jack White have all referred to him as a teacher, not just of guitar, but of how to live on your own terms. One of Gibbons' most unique habits is his silent ritual before every show. He sits alone backstage. No phone, no conversations, no distractions. Eyes closed, hand resting on his guitar, waiting for the moment to step out. Not to meditate or get into the zone, but because, as he once put it, music is the only thing I can talk to without being interrupted. In a world where everything is measured by views, likes, and virality, Billy Gibbons chooses to live slow, quiet, and real. And perhaps it's that deliberate solitude that's kept him grounded and whole, while so many of his peers have fallen to addiction, fame, or the crushing weight of their own shadows. Legacy and influence. He never demanded recognition, never needed glittering praise. But after more than 50 years, there's no denying it. Billy Gibbons is one of the last living guardians of the original soul of American rock, the kind born from dust, asphalt, glowing tube amps, and pain too real to be written down. Gibbons isn't the fastest guitarist. He's not the flashiest or most complex, but he is a master of nuance. In his hands, every note carries its own shade, its own mood. With his legendary Pearly Gates, a 1959 Gibson Les Paul, he crafted a tone no one could replicate, a vibrant, greasy, Texas-born blues sound that felt both raw and hypnotic, stripped down yet endlessly deep. That guitar became more than an instrument. It became a symbol, not just of ZZ Top, but of a whole musical philosophy. Less is more. Rolling Stone placed him on its list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. But what earned him real reverence wasn't the ranking. It was the way he inspired musicians who didn't want to be superstars, only true to their sound. Artists like Jack White, Dan Auerbach, the Black Keys, John Mayer, and even Keith Urban have all cited Gibbons as a major influence for his understated style, his intentional minimalism, and his unwavering trust in instinct. Beyond the music, Gibbons left a heavy imprint on the visual language of rock. He was the creative force behind ZZ Top's image. The long beards, the shades, the leather jackets, the cowboy boots, the effortlessly cool attitude. Music videos like Sharp-Dressed Man and Legs weren't just hits. They were fashion manifestos, cultural artifacts. In the golden age of MTV, ZZ Top became the most visually iconic band without ever truly showing their faces. Though rarely vocal in public, Gibbons remains an unspoken mentor within the rock community. He once taught Slash how to use a slide. He inspired Dave Grohl to fuse genres fearlessly. He's worked behind the scenes with legends like Jeff Beck, B.B. King, and John Lee Hooker. To many, he's known as the silent sorcerer of modern blues rock. But perhaps Billy Gibbons' greatest legacy isn't found in accolades or magazine covers. It's in his unshakable loyalty to his own soul. While the world spun faster, he stayed rooted, like a landmark in time, reminding us that music doesn't need to reinvent itself to survive. It just needs to stay true. Present day. At 75, while most of his contemporaries have long retreated from the stage, either lost in nostalgia or silenced by age, Billy Gibbons keeps rolling down the highway, guitar in hand, riffs still burning, and his unmistakable cowboy swagger fully intact. To him, music isn't a career, it's a way of being. And age? Just a number on a driver's license. In 2024, Gibbons reaffirmed his relevance as a restless, ageless artist. He performed alongside Lynyrd Skynyrd at CMA Fest, seamlessly blending Southern rock with modern American country. He also contributed to Friendly Town, an album by the legendary Steve Cropper, a quiet bow to the giants who shaped him. But those were just the opening chords of what would become an even busier year ahead. In early 2025, just when many expected him to slow down, Gibbons launched a solo tour across the U.S., from Blue Note, Hawaii to Chicago, Cleveland, Atlantic City, joined by his band, the BFGs, playing songs from Hardware and debuting new material. At every stop, he took the stage like only Gibbons could. Long beard, black shades, leather jacket, road-worn guitar in hand. But more importantly, he still delivered that unmistakable punch to the heart. No theatrics, no speech. One note was all it took to silence the room. Soon after, he reunited with ZZ Top for the Elevation Tour 2025, a full-scale journey across the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. With drummer Frank Beard temporarily sidelined due to health concerns, Gibbons kept the trio spirit alive with Elwood Francis on bass and John Douglas on drums. ZZ Top didn't replace with flash. They chose players who understood the band's soul. For Gibbons, this tour wasn't just a gig, it was a pilgrimage to honor the memory of Dusty Hill and to protect the sound that carried them through decades. Offstage, Billy still lives like a modern-day nomad in a digital world, tinkering with vintage cars, customizing amps, hanging out with snakes, and building guitars from materials no sane luthier would touch. He appears on the occasional music podcast, not to promote, but to inspire. To remind younger generations that real music doesn't need pretending, he once said, "I'm not thinking about retirement. If my fingers can't pick, I'll use my feet." That wasn't just a classic Gibbons wisecrack. It was a manifesto, a quiet vow that rock isn't a relic of the past, but something still pulsing through every heartbeat he brings to the stage. The older he gets, the less he says, but his guitar still growls like a 1955 Cadillac. It doesn't need to race, just start the engine, and a whole era comes roaring back to life. In a music world constantly shifting, where legends fade into memory or lose themselves chasing the times, Billy Gibbons remains exactly where he's always been, steady, intact, and unshakable. He never tries to look younger, never tries to stay trendy, never leans on nostalgia to win sympathy or cling to old fame. He simply keeps playing with the same belief he had half a century ago when he first strummed those opening chords on his Gibson. Gibbons isn't the guy shouting, "Look at me!" Yet somehow you can't look away. He doesn't need scandal to grab headlines, gimmicks to sell tickets, or grand statements to be remembered. Because in a noisy world, consistency is what truly stuns. He plays the way he lives, with a slow, quiet blues rhythm that never fades. And maybe that's exactly why Billy Gibbons is still here, still revered, not just as a guitar legend, but as a living witness to a kind of rock that never dies, as long as it's played with heart. If you've ever felt tired of today's music, too much flash, too little soul, just go back to Lagrange, Sharp-Dressed Man, or She's on Fire. There, you'll find a small man with a long beard standing in the storm of modern noise, not preaching, not complaining, just picking away, holding time for wandering souls. And if you ever ask yourself, is rock still alive? Just remember his name, Billy Gibbons, and his guitar is still ringing loud. If you believe the world still needs someone like Billy Gibbons, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your story in the comments. Because only when we keep telling these stories do legends truly live on.